If you found this video, then the hardest part is already behind you. And I know how dangerous that sentence sounds when you are sitting exactly where you are right now, carrying everything you've been carrying. Because the heaviness is still here. The confusion is still here. The nights that stretch endlessly into silence, and the mornings that arrive before you are ready, they are still here too. So hearing someone say the hardest part is over can almost feel insulting. But stay with me for a moment, because this is not motivation. This is not another temporary dose of comfort designed to make you feel hopeful for a few minutes before the old patterns swallow you again. What I'm about to share with you is something much more confronting and, strangely, much more liberating. This is recognition. A recognition of what you have already survived, what you have already endured in silence, and what that survival actually reveals about reality itself and your relationship to it. You did not find this video by accident. And I don't say that to sound mystical or profound. I say it because consciousness does not move randomly at this level. Not when the search that brought you here was born from something much deeper than curiosity. Something that has been building inside you for weeks, maybe months, maybe years. A question you could never fully explain. A quiet feeling that the life you were living somehow wasn't the life you were meant for. A growing suspicion that everything you were taught about reality was incomplete at best and inverted at worst. And that suspicion, that silent knowing that kept pulling at you even when you tried to ignore it, was never a malfunction. It was guidance, the most sophisticated inner compass you possess. And somehow, through all the noise, it led you here, to this exact moment. So before we talk about where you are going, we need to understand what you have already come through. Because until you realize the magnitude of what is behind you, you cannot fully step into what is beginning to open ahead. There is a phenomenon in physics that most people hear about once and immediately forget. But if you sit with it long enough, it changes the way you see transformation forever. It is called a phase transition. You see it when water becomes ice or when ice becomes steam. For a long time, heat is continuously added to the system, yet nothing visible appears to change. The water keeps absorbing heat, absorbing heat, absorbing heat. And from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. The surface appears the same. The temperature barely moves. And if you were the water itself, you might begin to believe all that effort was pointless. That all the invisible restructuring happening beneath the surface was producing absolutely nothing. But then, in what seems like a single instant, everything changes. The entire molecular structure reorganizes itself. What was liquid becomes vapor. What was dense becomes free. What was confined becomes expansive beyond measure. And this is the part most people never truly understand. The visible transformation was not where the real work happened. The real work happened during all those invisible moments where nothing seemed to change. The real work happened in the silent accumulation no one could see, in the unseen absorption of heat, in the internal restructuring that looked meaningless from the outside. And that is exactly where you have been. You are not approaching transformation. You are inside it. And the hardest part, the part that demanded the most strength, the most faith, the most willingness to continue when every external signal told you to stop, is already behind you. You already survived it. You survived it in silence. You survived it without proof, without applause, without certainty that any of it was working. And that is exactly why it matters. When I say the hardest part is already behind you, I am not talking about the most painful part. Pain may still visit you. I am not talking about the most confusing part either, because confusion may still come and go like waves. What I mean is the part that demanded the greatest amount of inner restructuring, the deepest reorganization of who you believed yourself to be. And whether you fully realize it yet or not, that part has already happened. Think about what it actually took for you to arrive here. Not just here at this video, but here in your consciousness, in this state where you are even capable of entertaining the possibility that reality is not what you were told it was. Not long ago, there was another version of you completely immersed inside a certain story. A story about who you are, what you deserve, how life works, what is possible for someone like you, and what is forever out of reach. And that story was not simply an idea you carried. It was the environment you lived inside. It shaped every reaction, every interpretation, every emotional pattern, every decision you made without even realizing it. It was the operating system beneath your entire existence. It was the water you were swimming in. Then something began to fracture. Maybe it was a loss that your old worldview could not explain. Maybe it was a strange moment of knowing that arrived without logic or evidence. Or maybe you simply became exhausted. Exhausted to the point where the old story no longer had enough life left to sustain itself. But whatever the trigger was, a crack appeared. And here is the part almost nobody understands about that crack. It did not happen to you. It happened through you. Something deeper than your conscious mind initiated it. Some deeper layer of awareness inside you called it forward. Not because you wanted suffering, but because some hidden part of you already knew the old structure could no longer contain the person you were becoming. And that first crack, that was the hardest part. Not because it was painful, but because of what it demanded from you. It demanded that you begin dismantling an identity you had spent your entire life constructing. It demanded that you stand between two worlds, between the person you used to be and the person you had not yet become, without any guarantee that solid ground would appear beneath your feet. It demanded that you continue breathing while your nervous system interpreted uncertainty as death itself. And still you did it. You are here now, which means you survived it. If this idea of transformation, observer consciousness, and inner reality is stirring something inside you, understand that this is only the surface of the journey. There are deeper layers to this process, deeper ways consciousness reorganizes itself long before external reality begins to reflect it. But let this land first. Do not rush past it. Do not allow the part of your mind addicted to problems to convince you that this realization is arriving too early. Sit with the truth that you have already done the one thing most people spend entire lifetimes avoiding. You allowed the old self to begin dissolving. When the current pulled you away from what was familiar, you did not run back to shore. Maybe you panicked. Maybe you struggled. Maybe you swallowed water in the process. But you did not drown. And more importantly, you did not swim backward. So now we need to talk about the question that naturally arises after this. If the deepest transformation has already happened, then why does it still feel like you are trapped in the middle of the storm? Why does your life still feel heavy at times? Why has the freedom that already exists within you not fully registered in your body, your emotions, your day-to-day experience? The answer is that there is a delay built into physical reality itself. At the deepest levels of quantum mechanics, reality exists first as probability before consciousness collapses it into physical form. The observer effect is not just philosophy. It is the mechanism through which possibility becomes experience. But this translation from inner shift into external circumstance does not happen instantly in the way human beings perceive time. There is a lag, a buffer, a strange in-between space separating the transformation within consciousness from the visible transformation outside of it. And this is where most people lose faith. Because internally, you know something has changed. You see the world differently now. Things that once consumed your mind no longer grip you the same way. Patterns you used to repeat unconsciously now feel foreign, almost absurd. You are not the same person you were 6 months ago, or a year ago, or 5 years ago. The inner shift has already happened, but the external world is still catching up. Your relationships may still reflect the old version of you. Your environment may still mirror an identity that no longer exists. Your finances, your body, your routines, they may still be echoing signals you stopped broadcasting long ago. And because the mind was conditioned to believe that only external evidence is real confirmation, it looks around and says, nothing has changed. This is not working. You are imagining all of this. But the mind does not understand something essential. The external world is always delayed. Always. What surrounds you right now is not evidence of your current state. It is an echo of your former state. It is the fading reverberation of an identity you have already begun leaving behind. And echoes, by their very nature, eventually disappear. I want you to think for a moment about the instant your old story first cracked open. The moment you realized, even if you could not explain it logically, that something fundamental inside you had shifted forever. Because naming that moment matters. It gives shape to the transformation. And this process is not wishful thinking. It is how fields reorganize themselves. When the signal changes at the source, the entire field must eventually adjust to match it. Not because of luck, not because of worthiness, not because the universe is randomly choosing favorites, but because that is how reality responds to the observer. Change the observer, and reality reorganizes around that change. But reality has density. It has momentum, which means this reorganization unfolds through what we experience as time. And that is exactly where you are now. You are inside the sacred and deeply uncomfortable space between who you have become internally and the reality that has not fully reflected it yet. And this changes everything once you truly understand it. This gap is not a mistake. This gap is not proof that something has gone wrong. This gap is the most creative space in existence. It is the space where entire worlds are born. It is the space between the final breath of the old reality and the first breath of the new one. And your only task here, your only responsibility in this phase, is simple. Do not fall asleep again. Do not return to the old dream. Do not force reality. Do not exhaust yourself trying to manifest harder, visualize harder, control harder, repeat affirmations until your body is tense with desperation. Just do not go back to sleep. Do not pick up the old story again simply because the new reality has not fully materialized yet. That is the instruction. That is the entire work of this phase. And if it sounds too simple, that is because the old conditioning taught you that transformation must come through struggle, complexity, pressure, and endless effort. But that belief itself belongs to the old system. The new paradigm operates differently, through resonance instead of force, through coherence instead of control, through allowing instead of demanding. And if something about this is opening a door inside you, if this idea of transformation, observer consciousness, and inner reality feels less like theory and more like something you have already been living, then stay close to this space. Subscribe, not for information, but for remembrance. Because there will be days when the old noise returns, days when the echoes feel louder than the truth, and you will need something that brings you back to yourself again. And if you want to go deeper into this journey beyond what a single video can hold, I left something for you below. A complete exploration of consciousness, inner transformation, and the deeper mechanics behind the shift you are experiencing right now. Not just ideas to think about, but practices you can actually embody. Take what resonates. Leave the rest. But do not rush past this moment. Let me say this again, because this matters more than you realize. Your only task right now is not to fall back asleep, not to force answers, not to wrestle reality into shape, not to exhaust yourself trying to manifest harder, visualize more intensely, or repeat affirmations until your body becomes tight with desperation. Your only task is to remain awake. Do not step back into the old dream simply because the new reality has not fully taken form yet. That is the entire instruction for this phase of your life. And if that sounds too simple, good. Because the old conditioning taught you that transformation had to be difficult, complicated, earned through struggle and relentless effort. But that belief itself belongs to the old operating system. The new paradigm moves differently, through resonance instead of force, through coherence instead of control, through allowing instead of demanding. And to understand why this moment in your journey feels so strange, we need to go deeper into the nature of identity itself. For most of your life, you have lived under the assumption that you are a fixed thing, a person with a name, a history, a personality, and a collection of traits that define you permanently. Maybe you were told you were shy, or ambitious, broken, gifted, unlucky, strong, resilient. And over time, these labels stopped feeling like descriptions and started becoming structural walls inside your sense of self. You built your entire life inside an architecture made from ideas about who you believed you were. And what has been happening to you? The thing that quietly led you to this video is that those walls have been collapsing, not violently all at once, because that would shatter your system completely, but gradually, relentlessly, one belief at a time, one assumption at a time, one I am statement at a time. And this is terrifying to the part of you that equates identity with survival. Because within the old paradigm, losing your sense of self feels like losing everything. If you no longer know who you are, then how do you move through the world? If the old story disappears, how do you make decisions? If you are no longer the person you spent your entire life believing yourself to be, then what are you? Who are you? This is the unnamed question that has been living quietly inside your chest. This is the invisible weight you have been carrying. And it is not a problem to solve. It is a cocoon to surrender to. Because the answer to the question, who are you without the old identity, is one of the most liberating realizations a human being can have. You are the awareness in which identities appear and disappear. You are not the mask. You are the space the mask appears within. You are not the story. You are the silence from which all stories emerge. And this is not philosophy. This is something you can experience directly, right now, if you become quiet enough to notice it. There is something inside you aware of your thoughts. There is something capable of witnessing your emotions without being consumed by them. There is something that has remained unchanged through every stage of your life, every role, every heartbreak, every identity, every version of yourself you have ever worn. And that something is not a thing at all. It is consciousness itself. It is what you actually are. The hardest part was never understanding this intellectually. Many people hear these ideas and store them away like interesting philosophy. The hardest part was beginning to live from this realization, beginning to release the handrails of identity and trust the open space underneath, beginning to make choices not from who you think you should be, but from what feels deeply true in the present moment, beginning to tolerate the terrifying freedom of being no one in particular. And this is what you have been doing all along. This invisible work that consumed your strength while producing almost no visible evidence. This process that made you question your sanity because nothing outside seemed to validate what was happening inside. You have been dying to who you once were. And every form of death, even symbolic death, even the kind that eventually becomes rebirth, asks for everything you have. So when I say the hardest part is behind you, this is what I mean. The death has already happened. The old self has already loosened its grip. Even if its ghost still walks through your habits, even if old emotional patterns still echo through your nervous system, even if the old voice still whispers to you late at night, the core structure has already collapsed. You are not dying anymore. You are standing in the strange space between death and rebirth. And as disorienting as this space feels, it demands far less from you than the dying itself did. Breathe into that for a moment. Let your body hear it, even if your mind still resists. The dying is over. What remains now is the blooming. But I know there may already be another voice rising inside you. Hey, voice saying, you do not know my life. You do not know what I carry. You do not know the darkness I face or the impossibility of my circumstances. And you are right. I do not know the details of your story, but I know the pattern. Because consciousness moves through recognizable patterns no matter how different the surface details may seem. Your suffering is uniquely yours, but the architecture of transformation is universal. Every seed breaks apart in darkness before it becomes a tree. Every butterfly dissolves completely before it reforms into something capable of flight. Every star is born from collapse. The sequence is always the same. Coherence, then dissolution, then apparent chaos, then reorganization at a higher level of order. And this is the phase you are in now. You are not becoming more broken. The chaos is not expanding. It is resolving itself. It only feels unresolved because this is exactly what reorganization looks like from the inside. So I want you to ask yourself something honestly. What old belief have you already released, even though letting go of it terrified you? What old identity no longer fully fits the person you are becoming? Because naming it matters. Sometimes your willingness to release one illusion becomes the permission someone else needs to release theirs too. Your nervous system, the physical structure through which you experience reality, has been calibrated to the old version of you for years, maybe decades. It built neural pathways around old emotional patterns. It created chemical baselines around old fears, old wounds, old identities. And even though your consciousness has shifted, your body is still trying to catch up. It is still firing old signals, still producing old sensations, still replaying emotional states your mind immediately interprets as evidence that nothing has changed. But this is not failure. This is the biology of transformation. The body is always the final layer to update because it is the densest part of your experience. Density takes time to reorganize. So when you wake up in the morning and the old anxiety is suddenly there again, or the old sadness, or that familiar feeling of not being enough, you are not actually experiencing your current state. You are experiencing your nervous system's memory of your former state. It is a recording, not a live broadcast. And the practice that changes everything, the practice that accelerates this transition more than almost anything else, is learning to stop believing the recording, not fighting it. not suppressing it, not trying to drown it in forced positivity, simply recognizing it for what it is. Ah, this is the old signal. This is the echo. This is my body remembering a reality that is no longer true. And then gently, without violence, redirecting your attention back to what is actually here before the mind adds its commentary. What is here right now? Awareness, presence, aliveness, the undeniable fact that you exist in this moment. And that raw state of being is untouched by your circumstances, untouched by your history, untouched by every story your nervous system is still trying to repeat. It is the ground that was always beneath you, even during the moments you could not feel it, especially during those moments. This is what the mystics meant when they spoke about a peace beyond understanding. Not peace because life suddenly became perfect, a peace that exists independently of conditions, a peace that does not come from external control, but from the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. And you have access to that peace right now, not because you earned it, not because you healed enough, but because it is what you are made of. It is what you are. And this is where the science becomes almost breathtaking. Research in psychoneuroimmunology has shown that the state of your consciousness directly affects the state of your biology. When you enter coherent states of awareness, states rooted in presence instead of emotional reactivity, your heart rhythms begin to synchronize. Your brain waves begin to organize differently. Your immune system optimizes. Even your gene expression changes. You are not simply feeling better emotionally. You are literally becoming a different biological organism, which means every moment you choose presence over unconscious reaction, every moment you return to awareness. Instead of old emotional loops, you are rewiring your nervous system to align with your new frequency. You are updating the hardware so it can finally run the new software. And once the hardware begins to stabilize around this new baseline, the changes in external reality accelerate dramatically. Because your body is no longer transmitting the new signal only during rare moments of meditation or insight. It begins transmitting it consistently as a way of being. And reality responds most powerfully not to temporary peaks, but to your baseline state. So the practice is not about chasing extraordinary spiritual experiences. It is about establishing a new normal, a new resting state, a new internal atmosphere that is more aligned with who you have become than with who you used to be. And this shift does not happen through one grand revelation. It happens through thousands of small moments of remembering what you are, remembering that the old signal is only an echo, remembering to breathe, remembering to return to this moment. But there is another layer to this journey that goes even deeper, because what is happening to you is not only personal. It is not just about your individual transformation, as profound as that transformation may be. What is happening inside you is part of something much larger than a single human life. There is a field connecting all consciousness. You can call it the collective consciousness, the morphogenetic field, the unified field, the quantum vacuum. The name does not matter. What matters is that it is real. It is measurable, and it responds. Every individual who moves through the kind of transformation you are experiencing sends a ripple through this field that makes the same transformation easier for others. This is not poetry. This is not metaphor. Rupert Sheldrake explored this idea through morphic resonance, suggesting that when enough individuals within a species learn a new behavior, that behavior becomes easier for the rest of the species to access, even without direct contact. The field itself updates. The pattern becomes available to everyone, which means your transformation, the one that felt so lonely, so invisible, so deeply personal, was never only about you. Every identity you released, every wall you allowed to collapse, every moment you chose awareness over unconscious patterning, you were not only freeing yourself, you were creating a pathway others can now walk more easily. You were contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. Feel the magnitude of that for a moment. Not as pressure, but as meaning. You did not suffer in the dark for no reason. None of it was wasted. Every ounce of effort, every silent internal battle, every painful realization, all of it was deposited into something larger than your individual story. And that investment is now beginning to return itself. This is another reason the hardest part is already behind you. Not only because your personal transformation has crossed the deepest threshold, but because the field itself has shifted in response to your shift. The current that once felt like it was tearing your life apart is now beginning to move with you instead of against you. The same intelligence that initiated your dissolution is now orchestrating your reconstruction. And it is doing so with a precision your logical mind cannot fully understand, but your body can already feel. So pay attention to the synchronicities. Pay attention to the strange moments when reality seems to wink back at you. A song arriving at the exact second you needed to hear it. A conversation carrying the precise message your soul was searching for. A door opening effortlessly without force. These are not meaningless coincidences. They are signs that the field is reorganizing around your new state of being. They are evidence that the old echo is fading and the new signal is finally being received. And these moments, these strange little synchronicities appearing around you, they will begin happening more and more often. Not because you suddenly became special, and not because you are finally doing everything right, but because the distance between your inner state and your outer reality is slowly collapsing. Day by day, the reflection becomes more accurate. Day by day, the world around you begins mirroring more of who you have truly become. Beneath the surface, and one day, maybe much sooner than you expect, you will look around at your life and barely recognize it. Not because you forced reality into a new shape through struggle and control, but because you became a different shape internally, and reality had no choice but to reorganize around that change. But even hearing this, there may still be a part of you that feels afraid. Afraid that this is too beautiful to be true. Afraid to hope again. Afraid that if you finally let yourself believe in what is unfolding, disappointment will return and crush you one more time. And maybe the deepest fear of all, the fear that you are somehow the exception, the one person these principles will not work for. I need you to understand something very clearly. That fear is not evidence that something is wrong. It is the final guardian standing at the threshold. It is the last echo of the old operating system trying one final time to pull you back into what is familiar. And the weapon it uses most effectively is the fear of hope itself. Because the old self understands something. It understands that the moment you fully trust this transformation, the moment you stop keeping one foot inside the old world, just in case, the process becomes irreversible. And the old identity does not want that. It wants to preserve the possibility of retreat. It wants to leave the back door unlocked. But the truth is, you already crossed the point of no return a long time ago. You just did not realize it because you were too busy surviving the crossing itself. The bridge behind you has already disappeared. The version of life you came from no longer exists in the way it once did. And the fear you feel now is not really fear about the future. It is grief for the past. It is the old self mourning its own ending. And that grief deserves compassion, but it does not deserve control. So let the fear exist. Let the grief exist. Let the uncertainty tremble through your body if it needs to. But do not hand it the steering wheel. Let those feelings sit quietly in the back seat while something deeper continues guiding your life. Because the deeper knowing inside you, the one that carried you to this exact moment, has not failed you yet. Think about it. Every intuitive pull you followed that made no logical sense at the time, every leap into the unknown that terrified you, every moment you chose uncertainty over comfort, that inner knowing guided all of it. And every one of those moments moved you closer to this realization, closer to this breath, closer to this freedom that was never something you needed to earn, only something you needed to remember. You are already free, not someday, not after you heal enough, not after you finally figure yourself out. Right now, in this breath, the cage was never outside of you. The cage was a belief, and that belief has already begun dissolving. You may still feel phantom walls around you. You may still hesitate when approaching the places where the bars used to be, but the bars are gone. They disappeared much earlier than you realize. The only thing still keeping you standing inside the cage is the memory of confinement itself. So walk toward the edge. Reach your hand out into the open air where the wall used to stand. Take one step, and then another. The ground will hold you. It always has. You just could not feel it through the numbness of the old story. There is a concept in quantum field theory called vacuum energy. It describes the immense energy that exists even within what appears to be completely empty space. Even in a perfect vacuum where every visible particle has been removed, something remains. The emptiness is not empty at all. The void is overflowing with potential. What appears to be nothing is actually the most fertile state imaginable, the ground state of reality itself, vibrating with infinite possibility. And this is where you are now. You may feel stripped bare. You may feel as though everything familiar has been removed. The old identity, the old certainties, the old definitions of purpose and meaning. You may feel as though you are standing in a vast emptiness with nothing solid left to hold on to. But that emptiness is not punishment. It is potential in its purest form. It is a reality not yet collapsed into shape, a field waiting for consciousness to meet it, not through force, not through desperation, but through presence, through openness, through your willingness to remain fully here long enough for the new form to emerge naturally. And something is emerging. You can feel it beneath the exhaustion, can't you? Beneath the fear, beneath the doubt. There is something quietly rising inside you. Something new. Something that does not even have a name yet because it has never existed before. This is not a return to the person you once were. This is not simply a better version of your old self. This is something entirely unprecedented. A version of you that could only be born through the dissolution of everything that came before. This is what the ancient alchemists were truly pointing toward when they spoke of the philosopher's stone. Not a literal object, but a state of consciousness that emerges after everything false has been burned away. The gold revealed after the heavy lead of conditioning has been transmuted through fire. And the fire was the pain, the confusion, the dark nights, the emptiness. That was the fire, and you have already walked through it. The gold is already here. You simply have to allow yourself to see it. So return to these words whenever the noise becomes too loud. Return to this remembrance each morning before the world begins pulling at your attention again. And if someone you love is still wandering through their own dark night, right now, share this with them. Because every time awareness is passed from one person to another, another ripple moves through the field. Another doorway opens. And this is how consciousness shifts collectively, one moment of recognition at a time. So here's what I want you to do right now. Not tomorrow. Not when you finally feel ready. Now, just for a moment, close your eyes and do not think about these words. Feel them. You have already survived the hardest part. The dissolution is complete. The old self has already loosened its grip and fallen away. And now you are standing in open space, in pure potential, in the quiet field that exists after collapse and before rebirth. And the same intelligence that guided every step of your journey, every breakdown, every wrong turn, every sleepless night, every moment you thought you were lost, that intelligence has not abandoned you here. It is still with you, closer than your own breath. And even now, while your mind is still trying to understand what is happening, something deeper is already organizing the next chapter of your life with a precision and beauty you cannot yet fully see. Let that truth settle into your body. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw unclench. Let the part of you that has been bracing for impact for so many years finally stand down. Not because life will never challenge you again, but because something inside you now knows what the old version of you never knew. You are capable of meeting whatever comes. Not through armor, not through resistance, but through openness, through trust, through the quiet intelligence moving beneath all things. The hardest part is behind you. And what comes next is not another cycle of endless struggle. What comes next is the blooming, the harvest, the visible expression of everything that was planted silently in the dark. And it may not look anything like what you once imagined, because the expectations you carried were created by the old mind, and the old mind could never imagine what this new consciousness is capable of creating. What is coming is better, not better, in the way the ego measures better, more status, more validation, more security, but better in the way sunlight is better than a description of sunlight. More alive, more real, more deeply yours. You are not behind in life. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are exactly where your own consciousness has been guiding you all along, arriving at the precise moment where your freedom can finally be recognized instead of merely searched for. And this moment, this video, these words, are part of that recognition. You are free now. Not in some distant future. Now, the prison was never physical. The chains were beliefs. The walls were patterns of perception repeated for so long they started to feel solid. And every one of those walls has already begun dissolving. The real seeing happened in the dark, during the moments you thought nothing was changing. The awakening happened inside the pain, during the moments you thought you were failing. The clarity was forming in the silence, during the moments you believed you had been abandoned. You were seeing through the illusion the entire time. You just did not realize that was what was happening. But now you do. And that recognition changes everything. Not because knowledge gives you power in the old sense, but because recognition completes the process. You do not need to force anything after this. You do not need to turn this realization into another self-improvement project. You do not need a 5-step plan to become what you already are. You only need to let this truth move through you fully. Let it settle into your thoughts, into your body, into your breathing, until your entire being begins resonating with the quiet knowing that what you were searching for was never outside of you. The search is over, not because you found some hidden answer somewhere out in the world, but because you finally became still long enough to realize that you are the answer itself. You always were. The real question was never, how do I become free? The real question was always, when will I notice that I already am? And this breath, this heartbeat, this moment, is that noticing. From here, everything changes. Not necessarily because the external world transforms overnight, although sometimes it might, but because you are no longer looking at reality through the lens of lack and striving and not enoughness. You are finally seeing from the place you truly are. Whole, complete, overflowing with the same creative intelligence that shapes galaxies, grows forests, moves oceans, and keeps your heart beating while you sleep. That intelligence is not separate from you. It was never above you or beyond your reach. It is not reserved for a chosen few. It is you. It is the fabric of your consciousness itself. And now that the old filters have begun falling away, now that the old identity is no longer standing between you and your own nature, you can begin feeling it directly. Not as an idea, not as philosophy, but as something alive inside you. Breathing, pulsing, real. So, welcome home. Not to a place, but to yourself. To the part of you that existed before the story began and will still exist long after the story ends. The part of you that watched this entire journey unfold with infinite patience, knowing that every mistake, every detour, every heartbreak, every dark night was quietly guiding you here all along. And the version of you listening to these words right now, the one who survived the fire, stood inside the emptiness, and kept breathing even when everything inside you wanted to collapse, that version of you is no longer preparing for life. It is ready to live it. So if something inside your chest recognized itself in these words, if some quiet part of you felt seen, remembered, understood, then honor that recognition. Not by trying harder, not by becoming someone else, but by allowing yourself to become more fully what you already are. Stay connected to this space. Subscribe not out of habit, but as an anchor point, a place you can return to whenever the noise of the world becomes too loud and you need to remember what is real again. And leave a word in the comments. Just one word that captures what is alive inside you right now. Not for me, for you. So that one day, months from now, when you return to this moment and read those words again, you will see how far you have already traveled without even realizing it. And if there is someone in your life still walking through their own dark night, someone still trapped inside the illusion that the pain will never end, share this with them. Not everyone will be ready to hear these words, but the ones who are, the ones standing exactly where you once stood when you first pressed play, they will recognize something here. Just like you did. The hardest part is already behind you, and you are free.